Welcome everyone to the February 17th City Council work session. Welcome to everyone here and those at home. We have two important discussions today. The first one is probably one of the issues we get the most email about ever, which is our parking issues. So this is something the public has a lot of interest in and we have a lot of interest in. It's downtown parking. The manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we get started in that, Emily will just respond to the question that came up last night about testifying about Civic Stadium.
Okay.
Which I appreciate. It occurred to one or many of you that you should think about whether or not you can express an opinion at a public hearing like that. Right now with Civic Stadium, there is no plan, nothing that we know of as far as action that would come before you. It's possible, as with any property, and perhaps more so with this property, that eventually you could be asked to look at a change in designation or something for this property. But right now, there is nothing like that. That being the case, you don't have to worry about ex-party contact. On the other hand, you should always think about whether the actions you're taking, the things that you're saying, may cause someone to believe that you are biased. And by that, I mean that you have a certain position that you have expressed, preconceived thoughts about the facts or what you want to happen with the property that make it difficult, if not impossible, for you to entertain other ideas. So as long as you can remain open-minded and that your expressions at a public hearing don't pin you in a corner that way, you're fine testifying.
Okay, I think Andrea has a question.
So let me just put my arms around, trying to decide how I perceive this. To me, the mayor's comments to us was whether or not we wanted to participate in a conversation about Civic Stadium, and so the conversation in my mind, I would go along the line of whether the city's involved or not what the future might hold for it, not giving direction to the school board on what our opinion is. And so that's kind of the idea that I was thinking about. I don't know what if that would be a problem at this point.
It wouldn't. That's totally appropriate, and I think you could even go further and express an opinion, so long as you're making sure that you're also remaining open to various possibilities. That if a question came to you about should this be zoned public land or should this be zoned something else, that you can apply the criteria to the facts and be fair.
Okay.
I think last night the discussion was about whether you want to have a discussion as a council about it. There was also a question about whether in the meeting this week, tonight, whether what role a counselor might have in wanting to testify before the school board. I think that was probably what was under discussion. Eddie?
Suppose one does put oneself in a corner, suppose one of us expresses a strong opinion, what happens to us?
You should not participate in a future decision-making
Then would someone say, would you be there, one of the city attorneys, to say you can't participate?
Yeah, as you know, when we have a quasi-judicial hearing on a land use matter, I or the mayor would generally ask whether you have any ex-party contacts or if there are any other issues that you'd like to talk about, and that would be the appropriate time to...
No one's ever been told that they can't participate.
Not in my history with this government, but it happens. In other jurisdictions, it's happened, and it's also happened where a counselor didn't come forward, and it got into the court system, and the court saw the evidence and sent the decision back because a counselor participated that shouldn't have.
Is the declaration of a previous statement, even if it may lend to bias, enough to compensate if you're able to say prior to the decision, but I'm able to make an unbiased decision? Yeah, unless the evidence is so stacked against your ability to be fair. I think it's always great to just say, I can be fair. I have said these things in the past, but I'm open. And that's very good evidence that you are. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're through with that.
That's why juries decide things.
I should say before you begin, City Manager, that we have two counselors who are not present that I think are supposed to, I don't even know if they're on, have called in yet, but we think they may be joining us by phone. That would be Councilor Poling and Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Susan, knowing that we're got a couple of big items today. So.
Thanks, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Susan Muir from the Planning and Development Department. Just want to frame this discussion for you a little bit today. Thank the subcommittee, which are Councilor Clark, Councilor Taylor, Councilor Tease, and Councilor Pryor for their work in helping us get here today for this discussion. You've heard a lot about the downtown strategies and what we're trying to do to foster a vibrant downtown and boost our local economy, and we have the 4 strategies of attraction amenities, parking, safety, and jobs and redevelopment. And so today is really earmarked to talk about that parking issue. This is our opportunity to listen to all of you and get feedback to try and shape the next level of discussion that we'll get to on parking. So we are here to listen. Jeff's going to kick us off by giving us a little bit of background and some options to start your discussion, and then we'll listen very closely to what you all say to us.
Ready? Okay. So we thought we'd start off with a photo of downtown Eugene from the 1969 big snowstorm. And I think this is something our neighbors to the north would really like to have right now for the Olympics. So we're here today to listen to your thoughts about the scope of downtown free parking. At the parking subcommittee meetings, we discuss ideas and options that would draw more people to, spur greater use of, and leverage economic opportunities in downtown Eugene. At the last parking subcommittee meeting, we threw a map up on the wall, got out some markers, and we drew some lines on the map. And that map is tried to frame a review area to look at various options for free parking in the greater downtown area. So we came back with 4 areas, and these can be molded and merged and building Lego blocks, but we called the biggest one the downtown Midtown option. The second one is a public safety zone. The third option is a West Broadway development option, and the fourth one is to add more on-street free spaces. Like this is deja vu from our last work session. So in the option 1 area, this is the downtown to Midtown option. This is just kind of frames the big parking discussion. So just to get reference, we're up here in City Hall. We got our park blocks, the Holt Center, 5th Street, 16th, 11th. We have High Street over here. That's Lincoln over here, and then Oak and Olive on the sides here. So in this area, there are approximately 41 blocks. The value of the on-street parking, the actual nickels, dimes, and quarters that go into meter heads is $650,000 a year, and there are about 930 meters. Another option is the downtown public safety zone, essentially 7th Avenue on the top, 11th on the bottom. We have Pearl Street on the east side, Lincoln to Lawrence on the west side. And we got, on all these options, we included both sides of the street, so if there's a block face that wasn't technically in a zone, we grab those meters also. This is about 20 blocks. The value of the nickels, dimes, and quarters on the street here is $440,000, and there's about 480 meters in this area. This is a West Broadway development option. Essentially, it's Lincoln and Charlton. Here's Broadway, 7th to 11th. We have our Beam project that we're talking about. We have Lord Liebrick that's moved in. We have the LCC project, and then we have West Town 8th as some other commercial property here. These are the Broadway North, the Broadway South garages, or the Broadway Place apartments. And these are in your packet. I should have backed up here. This is on page 121 of your packet. This is about 19 block faces. The dollar value of the meters in this area is $100,000, and there's about 160 meters in this area. Here's another idea. This is the 15-minute customer parking option. One of the concerns we hear from visitors downtown is they just want to pop in, get a sandwich, get a cup of coffee, get their watch fixed, run into City Hall, maybe pay a parking ticket, Lane County. So why not put out some 15-minute parking signs on the street, sprinkle them around downtown? It'd focus on pick-up and drop-off businesses. Depending on the size and scope here, we threw a number of about $10,000 in here. That's probably 10, 15 parking spaces scattered around downtown. Yes, that's 12 minutes in front of the post office. We have no idea why 12 minutes was picked. It's been there forever. This is in summary. This is how much will it cost. And the cost is when you pull the meter head off and no longer collect the nickels, dimes, and quarters in them. We summarize them here for the various options from the downtown Midtown to the 15-minute customer parking. The capital expenses over here is the cost of pulling the meter head off and adding a parking sign there. Most of these areas are concrete sidewalk and capping the meter poles that we don't need. So how do we pay for this? Well, here's some ideas and options to consider. In the downtown area, we offer first hour free parking. That could be eliminated. We could eliminate the free Saturday parking in all the parking structures in the core of downtown. In the campus area, we could increase the meter rates. We could increase the number of meters. We could create a new on-street parking permit for the multifamily complexes that are going up on the south and the west sides. We could increase the residential parking permit price. It's currently at $20 a year to park on the street. Another idea is the financial. The parking fund contributes 13% of its annual operating revenue to the general fund, just shifts it right over every year. And it reduce all or portion of the parking fund transfer. And the current fiscal year, that's about $617,000. So free parking is one idea of downtown improvements. Other things that are other parking improvements we could change, increase is the garage safety, easy payments, rebrand, and spreading the word. In the garage safety, we operate 24 hours a day, every day of the year, sometimes 4 or 5 officers circulating around the downtown core through the parking structures and the surface lots, including the library. Those are 2 of our officers are on the left. On the right-hand side is the Broadway North restrooms, which, because we have enhanced security services, we actually keep our restrooms open longer in the night, and which has been a benefit. Two challenges of this area. So, easy payments. Easy payments simply refers to credit cards, whether it's paying directly with a credit card or enabling a pay by cell phone option. The picture on the left is a multi-space meter. We find these in our parking lots. The image at the bottom was the pilot we did for 90 days of replacing single-headed meters with a pay-by-credit card option. And what we find with credit cards is it's more convenient, and people tend to stay longer in the parking spaces. The upper right-hand corner is actually from Aspen, Colorado. It's what they have on their meters. It's a pay-by-cell phone option, very easy to implement. There's a small transaction fee for each cell phone call, but that's tied back to a credit card again. Another improvement area is to rebrand our downtown parking system. So this is the parkade. We've been looking at this word called ePark. When you go to Portland and you drive into downtown, you look for the word Smart Park because it's easy and it's economical. And business validates parking down there. It's just a great branding they've done there. So we've been trying to apply the same concept in Eugene, and we're looking at the word ePark. Here's what it would look like if we superimposed it on the parquet garage. At the bottom there, very clear, legible signs that talk about the free parking programs that we have. Spreading the word. People don't know many of the things that we have in our parking program. So the blue, and this is in your packet on page 127, the blue shaded areas are City of Eugene managed parking lots or parking structures. The triangles stand for our free Saturday, Sunday, and holiday programs. The asterisks in the parkade and the overpark garage here stands for our first hour free and our business parking validation programs that we offer. All these lots and structures, except for the train depot lot, offers free parking after 6, and it doesn't kick in until 7 a.m. the next morning, Monday through Friday during the traditional work week. And we also have scattered throughout downtown. Here's the library. We have a 10-minute visit, come in, drop your books off, jump out. We got some daycare parking on front of on Willamette, on Oak. The Holt Center has some free parking. And here's a 12-minute parking signs in front of the post office. So as we go forward in spreading the word, we're hoping to hear from you in spreading the word to us about the options to look at.
So we're available, and we'll listen to your discussion and look for direction.
I'm just, Alan, are you there?
I am.
Do you want to be in the queue?
Yes, please.
Okay. And George, are you there? Nope.
See a phone by George. Oh, same one.
All right, so we got Alan there. So I want to give the chance to, if they want it, Mike and Betty are already in the queue, and if Andrea and Chris want to say something, because you all participated on the committee, I don't know if you have any opening comments you want to make. Okay, Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate all the work, Susan and Jeff, very much. This last meeting, I felt like we had an opportunity to put a lot of good decision points on the table. You've summarized it very exceptionally well. I've been working on this for quite a long while. Made kind of a thing of it because I think that to be able to say we have some metered-free parking downtown is an integral part of revitalizing our downtown core. It says in the parts where we apply it downtown that our downtown is open for business. And there's 3 or 4 different ways to twist this, and there's other information that isn't listed here. For example, the idea that when you put up signs and take down meters, that has an effect in revenues as well. And I know that that's a lot of speculative work goes into how much financial impact we think will be. But I must tell you, I originally proposed the idea of having just that downtown safety zone. And if that's all we can get to, I'm okay with that. If it's just a smaller geography, I'm okay with that too. I'd just like to see us try, if for a year or 2, an opportunity to say we have some meter-free parking downtown. Now, I'm not as crazy about the idea of affecting the current free parking, first hour free and Saturday and weekend free, because I think those in the garages are an integral part of some of the successful things we do with Saturday Market and with the Farmers Market. And I don't want to mess that up in the process. But I would absolutely be willing to look at either limiting the geography to the place that we can, or certainly increasing the number of meters around the university and or the price around the university. And the reason is because they are always full. There is no shortage of desire to do that. And I'd also be in favor of lessening the amount, because the parking fund nets money every year. It's a net profit affair. I'd be in favor of lessening to some degree how much money we transfer to the general fund, because I think this investment is worth it to make our downtown more inviting.
So before I call on Betty, Alan, I don't know whether you have papers you're moving around, but we're getting a little racket on this end of the line, just to let you know.
Keep it down, Betty.
Yeah. Okay, Betty.
Thank you. First, I have, I'll save my questions. First, I think this is really maybe the best investment we can make in downtown. And the business people I've talked to think that we should try it. I had asked if you would bring the savings that we would have by eliminating meters, and I didn't see that. The cost of the meters, the cost of maintaining the meters, the cost of checking the meters, and I assume that the parking people would be able to spend some hours on something else if we didn't have the system. So you don't have that, do you? The savings?
I have, we have the expenses of the program that for the meter maintenance, the meter collection. And I guess I just want to preface it that we also have meters on campus, and so there's not a complete, if you eliminate those meters, there's still some savings there. So the parking meter maintenance program is one person, runs $100,000 a year. Our meter collection is through a contract with the Oregon Armored Services. That's $36,000 a year, so about $140,000 to collect from downtown to campus. So maybe half, $70,000, would no longer be used for the downtown, if you had no meters at all in the downtown core. So
People who drive, you're counting the person who drives around giving tickets.
So the parking enforcement program, and if you had no enforcement of any parking, including the off-street, part of their job is on-the-street meters as well as the parking garages and surface lots. So if you were not enforcing any of those, that program cost is the parking enforcement officers are $740,000. The municipal court adjudication of parking tickets is $410,000. And I would say they write 75% of their tickets on the campus area. So,
Thank you. So we could save some money as well as losing some. I noticed in your first slide, in 69 there were meters, and I know from personal experience that in 79 there were no meters anywhere near downtown. Do you know when they came down?
I think it was, it's in that first presentation we did a year or so ago. I believe it was 1971, 72, in that time frame. And then the meters went back in around 1991.
Mm-hmm. I know that when I first came to town in 79, that it felt so friendly. All this area down to Midtown, free. You drive toward downtown, you see a sign that said, "Welcome to downtown, park free." And it made me feel welcome. I think that, I think it's really, it would be a great thing to try, and I think it'd be one of the best investments we could make in downtown. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. At least 2 business people who used to be downtown who recognized me somewhere said they left because of the parking situation, because their customers were not happy with the parking. And the time you have, and the fact that you're if you stay a little bit over, you're under threat of getting a ticket, and just the hassle of having all the things make people feel less good about being here. Some people who are currently downtown worry about the competition with 5th Street Market, where they have 3 hours of free parking. And that's what I hope we will get, is 3 hours of free parking. Then some questions, another question about the Halt Center. Where there are no meters, is there a charge for parking there during the day?
Yeah, so let me clarify that. The Holt Center and Hilton have turnouts from 6th and 7th Avenue, and that allows patrons of both sides to jump in, buy their tickets, come out, do short-term business, and I think it's 10 or 50 minutes parking.
Sometimes there's no one there. I parked in there one day at the Holt parking garage. I was scared the whole time, but there was no one there, and some places there were no meters, so I didn't know what the regulation was. Susan, you have
Just for clarity, the part that we're talking about is the little loop. There's a pole out right on the street. We're not talking about the garage piece of it. Those are two. Right, you're talking about the garage, and what Jeff's talking about is there's some free areas you can pull out and just pop in and get your ticket and come back out.
My question was about the garage.
Yep.
On the west side, level 1 of the Holt Center, there is a meter there, paid meter. On the rest of the garage is permit and event. That garage essentially fills up every time there's a Holt Center event. So it's.
I know it does during an event, but some other times it's largely empty, and it's confusing. I like Mike. I'm not in favor of getting rid of the first hour free, or we don't want to go backwards. We don't want to try to be welcoming and make people feel good, and then make them feel bad in another way. I have one more question, I think. Oh, the garage. I was confused about the garage safety. I've only seen someone in the Overpark one time. You said they're there 24 hours?
They are. I think the residents of the Broadway Place apartments greatly enjoy the security that's there. They rotate around, so you may not see them, but they see people there, and they just don't stand there. They're walking around, so they're there.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on one piece before I call on Andrea if she wishes, and Chris, and then Alan. It seems to me that probably what we need after this meeting is some kind of more complete matrix of the savings and the losses based on some of the things that Betty asked for. And I was going to say, even if you reduce by not having meters, if you're going to have time parking, you're still going to need somebody out there working to make sure that people don't just stay there indefinitely. So in any case, you'll have to figure out what that matrix is about how much that would relieve the need for oversight and how much it would add to it. So just clearing that picture would
Another
be good.
round.
Andrea, do you have some comments you would like to make?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. So I was on this committee because Mike asked me to be. I'm not totally bought off on changing the way we do business down here, but I think that I've gotten enough feedback from some of the business owners I've spoken to about perhaps looking at this in a window of time. I had my original concerns was that the comments about trying to encourage people to come downtown. My challenge would be the first time that we hear complaints about the kind of people have issues with their behavior being down there and parking for long periods of time. We can't treat people differently just because of their behavior or because of their cars parked there and it's the merry pranksters. That would be a challenge for some folks, I think. And so that's kind of my first reaction to this. And the other piece of it is also the fact that we're talking a lot of revenue here that we're going to be challenged to replace, and I'm really uncomfortable going into the budget. I'm really kind of nervous about okay, if we do this now, then that's much more money that we're going to have to cut out of the budget. So that's my challenge. And then the other issue that I thought about quite a bit, and actually I talked to a couple of folks down there about, is with all the building that we're going to hopefully be bringing along the line, I want things to be turning over. So like if if the hospital does move there and it's a VA clinic, and sometimes those hospital visits are 4 to 6 hours if they've come from out of town, I want those to be able to be turned over. And so that's kind of, and so, I could look at something for a short period of time until some of the activity happens that we want down there, but I really won't be able to support a broad brush approach, something small and directed, and for a short window of time, a couple of years maybe, I might be able to get there, but as far as, it just doesn't feel right to me. I wouldn't want to support cutting Saturday markets, free parking, Saturday day free parking, or the first hour free parking, but I'm also kind of challenged to increase street parking fees for people who own their houses in the university area too. To me, that is kind of displacing, the cost. It's shifting it. If we were to talk about more meters in the university area, that's okay. Let's talk about that. But also increasing the hours with that though too. So I don't know. It's been a pretty good discussion, and I think it's been a worthy effort to work on.
Chris?
Thanks. I have not been able to attend all the meetings, but I've gotten kind of my sense of what I think is going here, and I keep coming to the outcome we're trying to get to. What's the best possible outcome, and that is a revitalized, improved, growing downtown. Is this the primary way that's going to get there? No. It's a step in that direction, and for that I support this concept. I want us to create free parking as part of the strategy to rebuilding downtown. Is it the first strategy, though, or the primary strategy? No, not really. I think most people have kind of come to the conclusion that there's no point in having free parking if no one's going to come downtown because they don't feel safe. So these are all interconnected. So I then look at the consequences of every decision we make. There are consequences, and if you take paid parking out of downtown, the consequence is budgetary. There's a cost. And so then you say, okay, if that consequence rolls into another one, then what do we do with the money we lose? Where do we get it from? Do we get it from here? Do we get it from there? What could that money be used for? Could it be used to pay for additional police downtown? So I guess really for me, it's an interesting and a lively discussion that leaves me unclear as to what my final choices would be, because I want free parking downtown. I see it as being a great thing. What I want to do is figure out a way to do it without the unintended consequences. You want these consequences, but you don't want these ones. And I think we need to still consider how we can get A without having to also have B along the way. But to me, this conversation is an important one, but it shouldn't take the place of or achieve greater significance than the public safety discussion downtown, because I think they're both important discussions, and while I want to have this one, the public safety one to me is an even more critical discussion, and the money to pay for that is also in play as part of the conversation. So that really wasn't a very good answer to the question, but it really shows how complicated this issue is.
Alan, you're next.
Thanks, Mayor. Jeff, can you tell us the results of the free parking pilot that was downtown? What did we learn?
Yeah, so we had, last summer we did a 2-hour free parking pilot, and during that time period, we learned that there were more cars on the street, that, you know, it seems like a small number, 7-9%, but that, you know, in that small block area, that equated to 3 or 4 more cars that were parked on the street. We did see employees shift to the street. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. People park on the street and pay for meter parking, and they still have a permit. I think I can't remember the details in the memo, but there was revenue pieces in there, but we did see more cars parking on the street.
So yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So really, we didn't see very dramatic increases. We saw actually way below expectations, I think, and a lot of people, including myself, think it really turned out to be an employee-free parking program for downtown. We didn't see much of an increase to it. You know, downtown is so complex in what we're trying to do there, and I agree with what Chris and Andrea had to say, and parking is just a small part of that, and trying to make an appealing and inviting downtown. I'm in favor of doing the development stuff and the public safety stuff first, and if we're going to spend money, that's where I want to put our investments. Paying for parking wasn't the cause of the decline of downtown, and free parking is not going to have much impact on downtown. Another question for you, Jeff. Can you, on page 116, the bullets, funding recommendations, can you explain the third, fourth, and fifth bullet about the campus parking area? And what is the campus parking district?
So the campus parking district is essentially, we define it as Mill to the east. And there are places where we have not put meters that, within a few blocks of the main campus area in the past, because most of our meters have go to commercial zones. There is unregulated, very high demand parking within a few blocks, Kincaid and Alder in that area, that we haven't put meters because they are multifamily apartment fraternities and sororities, but it's very high demand. And so part of that is we're looking at the number we could add more meters on the west side of campus. There's locations on the east side, as with the arena parking district comes into play on September 1st. We can increase the rates for parking on campus. In the on-street, the commuter permit is kind of I think Councilor Clark talked about 18th and 19th Avenue, Agate, Kincaid, in that area. I don't know if most of the people that park there are residents, and I think we might be able to come up with a different solution where we sell on-street parking permits that's greater than $20, essentially equated to a monthly parking permit to park your car on the street. The other interesting thing about the campus is the revenue we generate there is only 9 months of the year. It's for 9 months of the year we generate. It's a very high demand parking area.
So doing these 3 bullets, increasing the fees, putting in more meters, it seems like what we're doing there is hurting one commercial area to help another commercial area downtown. So hurting the campus commercial area to help the downtown commercial area doesn't make sense to me. And I hope when we go further into this, we'll hear from the campus business folks and that association about what they think about this idea. Do you have any idea what the impacts would be? Have you looked at that?
No, we have not. There's probably, it's kind of the pros and cons. We have not looked at very seriously in the impacts.
Yeah, and I guess the commuter parking permit, my experience living in that part of town, representing that part of town, is that students are mostly on pretty tight budgets, and charging them more, I think, will actually end up pushing more cars out into the neighborhoods, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. So all in all, these campus bullets here really, I think we should rename the what we're talking about here from the free parking program to the park cost shifting program, because that's really what this really does. So I have real problems with actually all 7 of these bullets. I don't think any of them are good ideas, but I do think you do have some good gem of ideas in here. How much time do I have, Mayor?
29 seconds.
I do think they're good ideas. I think your e-park stuff is really good. I agree with you 100%. When I go to Portland, which is quite often, I actually look for the smart park, and it really works. It's a good idea. I think of it as the economical, easy way to park, and that works really well. So I guess I'll need another round to talk about some of the things that I think are good.
Okay, Jennifer.
Yes, I know this is downtown parking, but I did want to ask a couple of questions about the university area. You said that there's a high demand for 9 months of the year, and that's true, but don't forget that there's a lot of Hayward events over the summer, and they have various student youth leadership conferences, and the dorms are always full of stuff that happens during the summer months too. Whatever happened to, Mike mentioned a long time ago about doing angled parking on some of those, like I'm thinking Agate and 18th, I guess, or 19th. No, 18th, sorry. Did that get any legs? I always thought that was a good idea to put more meters out there.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for Tom Larson and how to design a street. And I've seen other persons kind of map it out on their own free time. I think the challenge of the angled parking in that area is with the number of curb cuts and driveway cutouts. There's not that big of a gain in parking spaces. I think there potentially could be a gain. And what they have, it's Public Works and the traffic team there. They would need to look at the number of driveway cuts in that area. So
I fail to see how that's relevant to.
So the number of the more driveway cutouts you have on a street, the less on-street parking you can place on the street. And I think they've maximized the on-street parking spaces to fit into those gaps on the street. They're smaller sections. So as those curb cuts, as the driveway aprons go away, it enables more angled parking in that area.
So have they done that study? Or do people just theorize about it and think?
I am always open to adding more on-street parking spaces. So we're talking about it. I don't know how far along in the study, in the actual on-the-ground measuring the footage that the Public Works has looked at that.
Well, since we've been talking about this for a while, and this is not new, how can we get Public Works to make that part of somebody's work plan?
Yeah, so it is one of the bullets that we had on how we would actually fund this, is looking for opportunities to get more parking spaces on there. I think the diagonal piece is if you don't have enough to put 2 parking spaces in there because there's 2 driveways on either side, then you still just have 1 spot, which you had with the parallel parking. So it's just that sort of thing. We will look into it. That's part of the proposal that we would use to fund this. So I think what Jeff's explaining is we've done some preliminary looking at it. It's not crystal clear that it's going to really increase a huge amount, but it's not gone anywhere. We will continue to keep it as it's not dropped off our list yet. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I do support, well, now back down to the downtown parking, which is what we're here to talk about. I do support giving it a try. I think it's pretty compelling that we have that in the time that we have had paid parking, that a lot of different things have happened downtown. I agree that paid parking is not the reason that downtown is not the sole reason that downtown is having challenges, but it just seems like it has contributed. So I'm willing to give it a 1 or 2 year pilot to see how that works and evaluate it in 2 years or so.
So I wanted to let you know we have a part 2 for discussion today, and we've got about 5 minutes in this first 45 minutes. So if you've I've got Mike and Betty and Alan in the queue, so I'm just encouraging you, if you've got other ideas that you want staff to hear, that you deliver it as quickly and succinctly as possible. And I just want to say very quickly myself that I think there is something about, in this time when we're trying to shift downtown, the perception of friendliness, I think, is what it translates into reality may be different than how it feels to people. And I don't separate one from the other. I think we've got to be adding public safety elements, development elements, social service elements, and an invitation for people to come downtown and try to put all of those pieces together. I think we have to do it in a way that makes the best economic sense we can. And and then I try it out and see if it makes any difference, because we're in a very transitional time where we're really trying to lift a boat, and we might as well try to put everything in there to do that. I also wanted to say that I think the e-park thing is great. I don't know that it needs to be as big as a picture one, but I do think it needs to be vivid and easily identifiable and would make a big difference. I like the easy, if you're going to use meters, I like the easy payment, and I just also think that I agree that with the notion that we've got to make people a lot more aware of what parking options they do have, and making them more pleasant options also that you have in your future list, I think is, I don't know what kind of things you could do to the garages to make them more interesting and more fun sooner rather than later, but I do think there's a psychological power to that too. So those are just a few comments. And now Mike, and then Betty, and then Alan, and move fast, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to agree with the Mayor in a couple of other comments. This isn't the silver bullet to fix downtown. It's not. But it is an important part of the solution to making downtown welcoming again. If it is an effective part of, with increased public safety, as I've said for a good long time, and a number of other things that we're trying to do now, what we'll have is increased development of some of the ugly things downtown. And in doing so, we'll have increased property value downtown, and in turn, we'll have more revenues to the general fund, and this becomes revenue neutral. The idea is to try, like with tax increment financing, is to try and invest in the thing that you hope to see occur. And that's what we're trying to do here. Now, to this sort of thing, I guess I'll call a red herring argument. Jeff, can you tell me how many employees parked in metered parking spaces before you did the study?
We didn't track that.
You said that you had an increase in the number of employees who parked there during the study, and if you didn't measure it before, how do you know that?
We have that from the parking officers that drive by there. Most of them were parking lot permit holders. That was the main indicator.
So it's anecdotal from the enforcement folks.
And from the, yes.
I know that just because we talked about this earlier during the subcommittee stuff, that I don't think it's effective or accurate to say that there was an increase in employee shift in parking there, because we don't know how many were parking there in the meters in the first place. So we definitely know we saw some there. But when it's time limited with signs, rather than free it for any length of time, I think that's going to have the same effect that the meters would have on how long employees would be willing to park there. I don't think that's a part of this calculation. But I think, frankly, that one of the more important reasons to do this, too, is that for a very odd circumstance, Betty and I actually agree entirely on this issue. And if that's not a reason for us to just try it for a while, I don't know what is.
Okay, I agree with that. I just have a few things to say quickly. You look at Fifth Street Market and look how busy that is. They have 3 hours of free parking there. I know this wasn't fixed downtown all by itself, but when you compare it to places that do have free parking, you can see that they're doing well. Another thing I'd like to mention is if you go south of 11th down to 16th, there are meters all along the way, and they're usually empty. If they weren't there, people could park there and walk downtown, and a lot more people might do that. It's not that long a walk. And it would make it less threatening to park, actually. If you park there now with the meter and you walk downtown and you have lunch, well, your time's up already. And you have to worry about running out of time, about getting a ticket, which costs a lot of money, and so forth. About the comment about safety, I think working on safety first, I think the more people who are downtown, the safer it will be, and free parking will bring more people. There's nothing better than crowds of people to make it safe. And I also, Jeff, you said no one's downtown, and I wondered, how are we making money then? I think you said that. Just, you don't have to answer that. My next question is, has anyone looked at...
Perhaps he wants to.
Has anyone looked at... The 6th and 7th, I think, now belongs to the city instead of the state. Is that true? And has anyone looked at cutting down the lanes and adding more parking by having angled parking on those streets? That's a place to get more parking. And it would give people more, if provided it's free, bring more people down. And if you decide to start charging again someday, give you more money, get more tickets, which is not what I'm for, but thank you.
You want to answer anything? Comment? No? Okay. Alan?
I'll be brief. I guess the employee parking, how would you prevent employees from parking close by to their work if it were free? I don't quite get that. I think that's inevitable. And the linkage is very tenuous linkage between free parking and economic vitality of an area and free parking and more people. I think the burden of proof's on those who claim that this is true to show us that it is. I haven't seen anything come close to showing that this is true. It's all kind of conjecture. And two final points. If I were going to spend $650,000 downtown, this wouldn't be where I would spend it. I'd spend it on other things around helping development get down there and helping it be more safe. And having said all those very positive things, I do really like the e-park notion, the 5-point plan that Jeff put forward here, and I like the future projects. I think a lot of those have a lot of merit, and they have price tags to them as well, but I'm not really interested in burdening our already overburdened general fund with more money, or turning this into the park cost-shifting program.
So we're going to wrap. Thank you, Alan. We're going to wrap up.
No, I have to sign off at this point too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap this first part up. I'm just going to invite, I think, because I feel like there might be some more comments that people might want to make, and so I think that you should feel free to pass comments on to Susan, and she'll see if there's some more resonance about things as you think about them, because I think you've heard a lot of the thoughts of people who've spent more time thinking about these things, but more ideas may come up as you review this that might help them when they bring it back. Yes, Mike?
Point of order. Is the synthesized conversation today coming back to us as an action item?
Yeah, what our intent would be is to come back to the council with a recommendation based on not only this conversation, but all the conversations that have been occurring. And what's going through my mind right now, and maybe we'll have to revisit, is the timing of that. It feels like there's a couple options. One would be to come back where the council gives the policy direction that says, yes, we want to do X. And then part of the financial, the actual financial piece of that is part of the budget discussion. Part of what you would need to know is what the financial impact is while you're making that policy discussion, but the financial decision is made as part of the budget process. That would be one way to kind of get through that. So I'm trying to think about how we bring it back to you in a way that allows you to make the policy decision, but also understand the financial implications, but make sure that that also is weighed against all the financial decisions that you're going to be making. So that's what I'm kind of thinking through right now and how to do that. But yes, the idea is to come back to this body with a recommendation in which you then make a decision on.
Now, and just one other comment, to the extent that you can, and you, in some ways we're doing this, but not quite enough, I think. I sort of contextualizing it within the other changes that we think are happening and that we're trying to move along, and knowing what we're trying to move along and what's trying to happen, what pieces of this make the most sense, because I don't think we should be thinking of this separated from everything else we're doing. I think we should think about what are the things that could best enhance what we're already trying to push along, and what will, as Alan has expressed, have the least impact on us budgetarily, and those kinds of and there is a give and take in that, as Mike indicated. So just a lot of food for thought, but actually I think it makes it a more thoughtful discussion than do I like parking or meters or don't I. I think this is really a larger discussion about how we keep driving the things that we're trying to drive happening in the community, and how's the best way to accomplish that. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And then, item number 2 today is a very vexing issue. Welcome. This is the Lane Transit District discussion on their service reductions. They've heard me talk about this before, so that it won't be surprising at all if I start out this conversation by saying I think reducing service is just the opposite way of the direction that we would all think we should be going, and the implications of it are just extraordinarily vexing to me. And I don't know what any options that we have, but I'm glad that you're here to have the discussion and to kind of answer any questions people have, and then if someone has an epiphany about how we can solve this problem, I'm glad to hear about it.
I'm sure they'd be happy.
I know. Thank you for being here. City Manager.
Mayor, I'll just turn over to Mike and let him choreograph the presentation.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mayor and councilors, for taking time for the update on this important topic. I am Mike Eiser, LTD Board President, and Andy Labora from the staff. Mark Pangborn, General Manager, and Greg Evans, our Vice President for the board, are also here. You may remember I guess it was a year ago today that the ARA Act was signed, and that bailed us out of a problem. We were heading toward a big cut prior to that, and we were able to take 15 to 17% cut in service down to about a 3% cut in service. Unfortunately, that was a one-time thing, at least as far as we know. So we used that money well. We were able to reduce the amount of the cut in service considerably, and we sort of dodged a bullet. But we're back now to update you, and the update is not good. And Andy will run you through some slides here, and then we'll be available for questions.
A lot of this is background information that I gave you, but I wanted to tease out just a couple of other points, and I'll go quickly so that you have plenty of time to ask questions and provide feedback for us, and we really appreciate this opportunity. This graph just shows the upper line being ridership, and the red line, just kind of hard to tease out there, in the middle being our service hours, and then population on the blue line. And you can see that ridership traditionally tracks our investment in service, but a big change happened after the 2001 recession when we cut service a little bit. And that was mainly that fuel prices jumped to over $4 a gallon. We introduced our MX service, which increased ridership dramatically, and also introduced our middle school and high school pass program. So that's the good news. The challenge really comes in this payroll tax graph, which, because it provides 75% of our funding, we saw just a dramatic shift. I mean, something that, has only been seen really with the 79-80 recession. We were growing at about 8%, quickly deteriorated to a negative 12% growth rate. So that 20-point shift in payroll tax revenue resulted in the budget deficit that we're facing now. And there's been a lot of talk about the impact of personnel services, costs, and things. Over time, we've managed that at a pretty consistent rate. Some might argue that it's too high a rate, and that's probably somewhat accurate. But as long as payroll taxes were growing at a similar rate, we were able to kind of manage that and still provide more service to the community. But this type of a shift was pretty hard to absorb, and certainly didn't have the reserve funds to be able to ride out a storm like this. So as we look at the solutions on the revenue side, we control fares, and we've always had a very consistent fare policy and tried to gradually increase fares over time. Have had to be a little bit more aggressive with that in more recent years, and I threw this chart in because this has gotten some attention as well. This is a peer group of organizations that we look at on a number of different performance measures, and it shows that we're kind of middle of the pack in a lot of cases, and this reflects the increase in the monthly pass rate that we're proposing for July of this year. It's currently at $45. So you can see that we're not at the bottom, we're not at the top by any means. On the monthly passes, a little closer to the upper end on cash fares, but we want to be sensitive to the fact that these are hard increases for people to absorb, and we want to be sensitive to that, but we also know that there's a business community out there that expects people to pay their share, and for us, the fare voucher covers 23%. I think it was reported at 15% in the Guard, but and that goes up and down, but it was 23% last year. So we can't overcome the $6 million deficit by increasing fares. We could double fares, and that would generate another $6.5 million, but not really, because we would lose most of our ridership. So New York City can do that a little bit more effectively than us, and they are doing that to overcome their deficit. On the other revenues, state and federal, state doesn't provide any operating funds for us, with the exception of a little bit of money for Paratransit. And we got a little bit more that helped us out in this biennium, but no long-term funding source has been identified there, although Representative Beyer continues to work hard to find something at the state level to help us with elderly and disabled revenues. At the federal level, the reauthorization hasn't happened yet. As Mike mentioned, there may be another jobs bill. That would be great, but it, again, is one-time money, and we've got an ongoing problem. The local level, we really appreciate the work that MPC has done to allocate some of the STPU money for us. It helped the hole not be quite as deep, and we'll put that to good use. On the expense side, it's a real challenge. We have about 70 administrative staff people total in our general fund, and the bulk of our employees, 250 or so, are in the union. So that contract comes up June 30th, and we'll be working with those representatives from the union to try to manage those personnel costs as best we can, but to some extent those are outside our hands with the laws we have in Oregon. We do have some administrative savings that we're getting through wage freezes, and we're looking at furloughs or non-paid holidays and leaving vacant positions, just like you all and the school districts and the county. Everybody's dealing with those same kind of issues. So we're looking at those same opportunities. Materials and services, we don't have a big materials and services budget. It's dominated quite a bit by fuel and parts and utilities and such, so there's not a lot to save there. And then on the capital side, we've delayed capital projects as far as we can in terms of putting off bus purchases and things like that. So with 83% of our dollars on the operating side going to put that bus on the street, the 17%, there's not a lot to save there, so it really does come down to reducing bus service. So how do we do that in an effective way? Well, just as the streets on the main corridors provide the capacity to carry most of the traffic, and that's where you see the traffic, it's the same in transit. Most of our ridership comes along the corridor, so we want to maintain that strong corridor service while being sensitive to the fact that people need to get on those buses to ride down those corridors and not completely give up on coverage as well. maintaining a minimum urban route frequency of 60 minutes. The alternative would be something like, going into neighborhoods every 2 hours, or, a real lifeline type of service, and that's not very good for urban route frequency. Obviously, we have to meet Title VI requirements, and that takes in this third bullet in terms of the low-income and minority block groups. That we don't want to be disproportionate to those groups, so we work with LCOG to analyze that very closely. And we certainly don't want to cost shift and move people from fixed route, which is much, much less expensive than paratransit. So those are the goals that we try to achieve. I gave you this map in your handouts, but gives a quick overview of the system and where some of the deleted segments of routes are. And it really illustrates that we still maintain a good level of coverage. It's not something that people can interpret easily, and that's why we really have encouraged people to come to our open houses, come to the public hearings, call staff, because they may see in some of our materials that Route 30 is deleted, but they don't understand that maybe Route 30 along the segment that they ride is being replaced by another route through merging of routes along corridors. And I think this is a little bit exaggerated because some of these areas are school routes that run one trip in the morning, one in the afternoon, so it looks like maybe there's a lot of coverage out in an area that really isn't there throughout the day. But we don't want to minimize those segments that also are experiencing some losses in terms of neighborhood service, because there are some. So this is we have about a $3 million goal this year right now, and these numbers change daily as the planners work with the information, but the service piece is going to save about $2.6 million. The rest of that's going to come from the administrative changes that we'll make in the budget. And remember, it's a $6.5 million budget problem, but we're taking it in 2 bites. We can take the first bite this year, we can use reserves, and gives us another year to see if our assumptions in the long-range plan are accurate, and if we do have to have another cut, that would come in 2012. So there are some positives with the redesign, that map that I just had up there. The core routes, we're still operating 7 days a week, which isn't true in many districts around the country. You're starting to see a lot of districts cut Sunday, cut Saturday service, run weekdays only. We've also maintained our span from 6:30 in the morning until our last trip at 10:45 at night, which is another way that districts are really addressing some of these problems by really attacking the span of service. The corridors, as I said, are maintained, and it appears to be adequate in terms of coverage during the peak travel periods. But I can tell you now, we've got people being left at stops today at our current service level. It's going to be hard during some of those time periods under this new scenario. And we did try as much as possible to attack the lower productivity segments of routes. And our lower productivity segments are much higher productivity in many districts around the country. And so there are some significant impacts on some of those neighborhoods. For some people, the Point-to-Point Solutions program, formerly called Commuter Solutions, they do carpool, vanpool matching. They might be a resource for some people who are disenfranchised because of these changes. And RideSource, certainly for people that fit that category, seniors, people with disabilities that qualify, would be a resource that would be available for those folks. There's, again, those negatives are the loss of service in some neighborhoods, or maybe a little bit longer walk for an alternative service that doesn't run right down somebody's street any longer. And a really route-specific loss of maybe some midday service or span or days of week, and I can give you some examples if you're interested on that. But the big potential for overloads, in particular for wheelchair bays. There's only 2 wheelchair bays on a bus, and if suddenly you've gone from 15 minutes on a corridor down to every 30 minutes, that's a big loss in capacity for people who use mobility devices. So we want to pay attention to that as well and do the best we can to address that. We watch overloads on a daily basis, both for full buses and for wheelchair bays, to see where those are occurring today and try to address those. So we've had a pretty robust public outreach process. We really got a lot of bang for our buck because of, as Mike said, we went through this process last year. And so we held, meetings out in all the sub-districts, a lot of open houses, public hearings. And since we had developed a plan last year, that 15% or so reduction plan, we got a lot of great feedback, and we were able to incorporate that into the plan that we put together for this year. So it really has helped. But we've also had a lot of open houses. This year, we're about halfway through that process, and then we've had one of the 3 public hearings. And the reason there are 3 public hearings, normally we just have a couple during this process, but we decided to break the process into 3 implementation periods, and I'll mention that in a second. But beyond those open houses, we've gotten out to a lot of other committees. Our Accessible Transportation Committee went to Mass at St. Mary's and St. Alice's this weekend to talk to, those are the Spanish Masses, to talk to some of those folks, and it's a great way to get out and get some really good feedback from segments of the population that sometimes you can't reach just through an open house. So we've tried to be creative in reaching out to the community. Lots of communication with our community organizations, the Title VI organizations. The MPO or MPC Citizen Advisory Committee gone to twice, second time being tomorrow night, and Neighborhood Leaders Council, and many more. The chambers in particular, Chambers of Commerce, we've tried to tie into this. But here's the decision matrix I was talking about. We have 3 stages of implementation, the first being in June, about 7% of the changes. The board is being asked tonight at their meeting to adopt that first package. The second stage being in September, the third being in January, and that coincides with the opening of the Gateway MX line, and that's when some of the changes just in Springfield to be able to work with that new extension will happen. And actually there's a fourth, a very minor change in June of 2011. So we've got a lot of work cut out for us over the next year. And yeah, there we go. So I'm going to stop at this point. This gets into a higher level of detail in terms of some of the areas of town, and I'll let you guys just ask some questions now, and if it pertains to those things or it's the bigger picture stuff, I'll punt that over to Mike, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. I just want to say a couple things, and we'll start around. I think lots of times people think that we at city government can direct what happens with LTD, and we can't. We can certainly give you our best thinking, but we are separate entities with a separate governing body, so I want to say that. However, I will say that and you know this, that as we've looked at what can impact both carbon emissions and moved people around, it is importantly in your hands. And so to me, at this time, to be losing transit is just a terrible reverse, putting the engine in reverse, so to speak. So what I'm just going to tell you a few things that I've heard. People are concerned about the fares and the impact of fares. People are wondering whether you can't find some way to diversify your funds. They also are wondering if you really do invoice everybody, that you might be having share the burden. Are we doing a good enough job to get all that business support in? So, because I actually heard that this morning, that people do it voluntarily, but they're not.
Oh, and I could comment on that. I mean, the Department of Revenue is the taxing authority, and they receive those and pass them along to us. And over the years, there have been some issues with that. And many years ago, we actually had an intern that we got from the university just to spend time culling through the records and seeing if people were paying their taxes. And we found that some weren't. And we actually recovered some of those. And as part of our finance department staff duties, we have a person that spends time looking at that. So when we see a big project like the arena, we look at who those contractors are, because sometimes they're from out of the area and they may not even understand the payroll tax, and so we'd like to educate them on that. And be sure. And she, the staff person, I mean, she'll go down to the level of the Trailblazers played here on one game, during the year, and all the income that those professional athletes make by playing here in Eugene that one night is taxable, and she'll call up the Trailblazers and the Warriors or whoever and go after it. So I think it's a good question, and it's something that we are paying attention to.
To tell people that. The only other thing is something we talked about at the MPC level, but to me, it's really finding a way across jurisdictions here and with you to talk to Congress more strongly about the need for operating funds, that they don't help with that part of it, and that's the part that you are in dire need of. So I don't know how we leverage that conversation, and I don't know how you leverage that conversation across jurisdictions across this country so that we can really be a stronger voice for letting them know what's missing in funding, and that we really need them to work with us to step up to that. Mike?
We're fortunate in that our board vice president, Greg Evans, is very active in the national organization. And in fact, Greg, if maybe you'd like to give a little bit of an update on what we're doing through APTA.
Well, we've got two things going. I mean, one of the things that's coming up is, as you know, is the United Front trip, which Mike is going to be going on with some of the rest of you and others in local government to address some of these issues. So I can't strongly say enough that the more plugs that we get at at Congress, the better it is. I'm going to be going back shortly after that to the APTA Legislative Conference in D.C., and I'm on a couple of committees. One is the Transit Board Members Committee, and I'm the Region 6 rep, or the Western Region rep for the United States. And so we're going to be going on the Hill to Congress to, again, stress to our legislators that we need some operations relief. We need some creative ways to try to encourage local and state governments to make it worth our while to invest in transit operations. One of the dilemmas that we have right now is that people are saying that we need to reduce carbon emissions, we need to reduce traffic congestions, but the incentives to do that through public transit are not there. So what we are trying to suggest is, from the point of view of APTA, is to try to suggest some kinds of creative solutions in which we get more people out of their cars, more people on the buses, and then give a way for state governments and local governments to be able to invest money in transit operations, and therefore, solving some of the problems that we have, that are running concurrently. So we are in a very unique position right now, and I believe we're going to be having a conversation with Congressman DeFazio, and we're very blessed to have him in a position of power with the surface transportation bill coming up. But as you may have seen recently, Senator Harry Reid has decided that he wanted to do some major cuts to the surface transportation legislation that we're currently seeing, and to do that through the continuation of the safety lieu authorization. So we're facing some challenges there as well. So, whatever we can do, whatever support we can get from, our local constituency, whether it's Eugene, Springfield, Lane County, we need to really come together to find some solutions to this.
Thank you. Betty, you're next.
Okay, I had a question about, you said something about alternative for people where the routes have been eliminated or reduced. What kind of alternative? Would you explain that?
Andy, you could probably do that in better detail.
Well, certainly if you live in a neighborhood where, service is eliminated, there may not be an alternative to the bus. I mean, some people will live close enough that they can walk and maybe walk a little further to catch an alternative service that's close by. But the alternatives that I mentioned here were either a potential for carpooling. With all the buses having bike racks, some people may find that biking to a bus stop nearby where they can't walk to is a possibility. For seniors and people with disabilities who qualify for Ride Source, that may be their alternative.
Ride Source is the thing I was thinking
Yes.
about. And isn't that more expensive?
It is, and that's a tough thing to quantify. If you remove service from an area, you don't know how many people actually live there that may qualify for it. So it is a difficult thing to try to tease out. But I think the only thing we can do is try to meet and balance the budget, and then if we see that down the road, and we can track that in going forward prospectively, then maybe we would come back at a later date and say, you know what, we're spending more on ride source in this area. If we put regular bus service back, it might save us money, but it's hard to calculate that moving forward.
Another aspect of that is that in some of the routes that are cut, we're actually adding back some service. It'll just be reconfigured. You want to talk about the Breeze and how that would work?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's gotten a lot of comment is the Breeze service connecting the university to downtown to Valley River, which has been a successful route and product in terms of branding. We are eliminating that because it's about 5% savings out of the budget, and because we believe we have enough capacity using MX and routes that will be rerouted along Country Club Road to cover that particular area lost by the Breeze. So by adding a little bit of service to those routes in the Ferry Street Bridge area, we can go ahead and cover that and still provide an alternative to people.
And that costs less than the Breeze?
Yes, the net savings is about 4.5% of our service hours. So out of the 20% or so that we're proposing, you can see a route that runs every 15 minutes all day long is a very expensive route.
And it's also conducive to using transit.
It is, yeah, that's the dilemma.
Yeah. I just want, and a comment, it's just, and you know this, but it's so important to employment, both for people getting to their work, and there's the employment of the bus drivers too, but a lot of people will not be able to find work or get to work if they don't have public transit. Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
Well, thank you. Really appreciate coming by to give us the update. It's important for us to know, kind of as you know, what's happening. A lot of people don't realize how spoiled we are by the great transit system we have. I mean, for a city our size, it is one of the best in the country, and it's easy to kind of get into the idea that everybody gets this level of service, or that we have this great a transit system, and that when times get hard financially, you may have to make reductions. You're reducing back to what a lot of cities consider to be good service. That's on the positive side, but nobody wants to have to go backwards, even if they're in a good place, and you never want to go backwards. And a question I had was, I'm on the corridor study committee for MX, and part of what we've been talking about is the cost of delivering passengers via MX versus by local routes. And so, can you just kind of give me a quick overview? Once you take the initial infrastructure investment out, and you're looking at just day-to-day operation after it's all in place, what does it cost to move passengers using an MX kind of system versus a regular local route system? Does that help with this dilemma?
Well, it certainly does, and because, again, the cost factor in a fixed route bus being in traffic is that it continues to slow down, and so we have to add more and more service to keep the same level of frequency. And one of the things that we're in the process of doing is doing a deeper analysis of the cost per boarding, because we've just added the fare component. So we want to see, what we're getting in fares, what it's costing us to collect those fares, and add that in. But kind of the back of the napkin analysis was that, an MX ride was costing us less than half of a fixed route boarding ride. So in that case, it's pretty cost effective, higher capacity, moving at a consistent rate where we're not having to add more service to that corridor over time is a big benefit to the district and to the community.
Great. And then the last question I had was, when do you have a target date for when these would roll out, or are you still in the process of working?
Well, you saw, actually this June is the first round, and that's what we're going to vote on tonight. The other two rounds that are out there, the board has yet to act on. But we're looking at next fall.
And then January with the Gateway MX opening.
Okay, so those would basically be the 3 phase time periods. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Andrea?
Thank you. Thanks for coming forward and sharing this. This conversation has been happening in our house. My son works for y'all. So a couple things. I appreciate the outreach that you've done. And I originally had a lot of concerns before I reread the map that you had not done as much out in the Bethel and in the downtown area, but those look like they're going to be the least affected. You will still have routes, so I'm pleased for that, because those buses are always at capacity. The one thing, though, that you brought it up about ride source and people who are in who have alterabilities, like if they're in a wheelchair, don't you get reimbursed from OMAT for providing ride source? Isn't there some billing component that goes with that?
Oh, well, there's two components. I mean, we get the state funding, the cigarette tax, which covers a part of our ongoing operations for Ride Source, and the bulk of the money goes from our general fund. Then there's the Medicaid medical type trips.
Yeah,
So that's different, and that was just opened with our call center not too long ago. And so that's all being brokered through the call center, and so those trips are reimbursed.
And those aren't on the regular route, those are call for service, right?
Right.
You have to call and make an appointment.
Yeah, most of those are covered by taxis, some a little bit by our ride source vehicles. It's kind of a lowest cost by time of day analysis.
So I'm just curious, thinking about folks who use wheelchairs, I mean, if you only have capacity for 2, and if there's routes along places that are foster homes or, some of the lower income housing that we've built that have a lot of people in that area, have you thought about how, what's going to be the answer for these folks?
Well, just as an able-bodied person waiting at a bus stop where the bus is full, some people get passed by, and what ADA says is that you have to make a reasonable accommodation. So if they get passed by the next time, then we dispatch a vehicle to try to go out and pick them up. We haven't had to do that too often, but it is a challenge. The other thing we're looking at is ways to find more capacity on the bus. We haven't found too many places that have been able to figure out how to get a third wheelchair bay in, but that's something that we are looking at.
Councilor, though, from a board perspective, I can tell you that that's something that is one of our hardest decisions. I was in a public hearing where a woman talked about using the bus to go to the hospital when she was having a heart attack. We regularly encounter citizens that this is the way they get their medicine, this is the way they get to work, this is the way they get their pharmacy, go to the doctor's office. They're absolutely dependent on it. And so in cases we're weighing a route that has a small number of riders, relatively small number of riders, but people who are very dependent, versus a route that has a lot of riders and is heavily needed by all those people to get to work. And it feels a little bit like having to pick your kid if you've got 2 or 3 children. It's a terrible choice that we have to make. We do wrestle with it.
Well, I appreciate the work that you all do, and I'm sure that hopefully in better times they'll be able to add back services.
That would be our goal.
Because I really think that we do have a stellar bus system, and I know I've ridden the bus my whole time that I've lived here. That's how I learned Eugene when I first moved here in '75. As I rode the bus everywhere. I think I told everybody that story, but so I really do appreciate the support of public transportation.
Jennifer?
Yes, I just have a question about the Breeze route that you said was going to change, and you're not going to be using the Breeze buses, is that correct?
Well, the Breeze buses are just a 30-foot version of our Gillig bus. They're just painted and branded differently.
Right.
So we will be using them in other service.
Oh, no, okay, I was just going to ask if you're going to sell them.
Well,
I was thinking of some nonprofits
Oh.
that might be interested in a Breeze bus.
well, we do sell buses, and they go out to the county auction, and those will be replaced along with our oldest 40-foot buses that are getting very old over the next 2 years. So, but we have kind of a limited number of places to put even a 30-foot bus because it's just the nature of our routes. I mean, sometimes of the day, there are just a lot of people riding. Other times in the midday or off-peak, yeah, a 30-foot bus would be fine. But we do have a couple of Springfield circulator routes we're thinking that'll work real well for them, and then the Jefferson route that runs up in the Jefferson neighborhood.
You might be interested to know that because federal funds are used in the purchase, the feds have a lifespan that they put on buses. That's about 12 years, and we run our buses about 17 years through the effective maintenance that we do.
Yeah, our oldest ones that are in service today are 1991 buses.
Wow. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, George Brown?
Thank you. I was just kind of curious, and I mean, I'm not looking for an explanation in every single case, but I'm just looking at the map, and some of the frequency, you had to cut frequencies of running on routes that you are keeping. That I understand that. I'm just wondering about some of the if you could just briefly tell us what criteria you used to cut out entire routes. Was it there just weren't enough riders frequently enough to keep those routes viable, or I would imagine it'd be something like that, but...
Before Andy gives a detailed answer, I can give you a broad overview answer. What we know is that we've got $6.5 million problem, and we have to fix it within a 2-year span if we want to maintain the long-term viability of the system. Our goal has to remain, it's terrible to have to cut service, but we're talking about maintaining the viability of the transit system. So we have to keep our eye on that ball. I'm sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a terrible devil's choice here. It's just,
It is.
and I was just wondering more about what criteria you were using.
Yeah, and it goes back to, we get trip level data, so we know where somebody gets on, what time, what route, and so we can look at where the loads are and trying to maintain those ability of people to get to and from work along those main corridors versus, for example, an express route, say the 3X express route, you see it on that map up there, comes across from River Road Station along Beltline, goes down to the university, a convenient route for university workers, university hospital workers. But you can make that same trip by using corridor service that goes down River Road and transferring downtown. So that was one of the criteria. If there's an alternative available to people, it might not be as attractive, but you can still get where you're going to go. So that was one criteria. Second was productivity. And, you might, in Springfield, there's a street along Mill Street there, which is now going to be very close to the MX corridor, so many of those people can catch MX. But it also serves a Fairview neighborhood just north of Centennial, needed by people. But the total rides in a day, 31. One boarding per trip through that area. So, again, those people, and that was where this woman caught it to go to the hospital. I mean, it's heart-wrenching to know that they count on that, but they only ride once every week or once every month. And so for us to try to, again, meet this goal, and somebody will say, well, why don't you just reduce the service on the Thurston bus? It runs every 10 minutes. Do they need 10-minute service and we get no service? Well, what you have to understand is we're running buses every 10 minutes along that corridor with 60-foot buses that are full. So if we take one of those out, then people are going to be left at the stop. They're not going to get to work, and we're serving very similar populations. So that's a little bit about how we've tried to pick the least impactful areas, and some, again, will change, and we'll be able to, I think, make some adjustments based on the feedback and having a little more time to work with it.
Thanks. Andrea, did you have another?
Oh, I just had a little anecdotal thing that I could very well not share. I thought about it. When I was in San Jose at the NACO a couple of years ago, I always make my crew, whoever I travel with, ride the city bus just to get a flavor for the city. And we got on a bus that we didn't realize that the hotel we were staying at was right next to an alternative high school. So we got on the bus. It was half full.